So guys, coming down the pipeline are some new rules from the cell phone carriers like AT&T, T-Mobile, and even Verizon. The do's and don'ts on text messaging for your wholesale business to generate leads. Well, I got an expert here with my man from Batch Leads that's going to tell us what we can and can't do. So you know what you need to do is simply stand by. Let's get it.
Flip man, it's the flip man. You want some money in your hand? Flipping houses without credit or your cash. Get that bag.
Hello guys, this is Ty, aka the Flip Man, and today with my man here, Evo from Batch Leads, and he's here to answer questions about the changes that are coming down the pipeline for text messaging, I guess cold calling for us wholesalers, us real estate investors, because that's one of a couple of ways that we generate daily leads. So enough of me. What's going on, Evo?
Hi, how you doing, Ty? Great to be here.
I'm good. So I've been getting questions, emails, posts about this, and I wasn't aware of it. So I figured I'll reach out to you guys. I'm partnered with you all. That's why I run my text to flip through Batch Leads for the text messaging part of what I do and what I recommend others do, which your services are great, just all of them. But so if you can get us an idea what is going on or what's about to happen and when we'll go from there. I'll have questions from there.
Sure. So to not take a couple of hours to do the recording, I'm just going to try to summarize some of the things, the changes that are coming. Right. And hopefully, obviously, you can have some maybe like questions for me. And obviously, I'll try to kind of cover like from a broad perspective, so users can try to understand how some of the things are going to be, how they're going to be impacted potentially. So there's basically the trace tag that's happening, and then there's the 10 DLC thing that's affecting text messages. The trace tag is more about like just fighting, and we can always talk about cold calling versus like text messages as well. I'll kind of stick to one side for now, and then we can kind of cover the other one. So as far as like text messages, there is what's called like the 10 DLC changes that primarily T-Mobile and AT&T are trying to implement. So what that means is that they're basically saying like, hey, like text messaging in general has gotten out of hand. Now, this is not just impacting real estate. This is not just impacting certain industry. This is impacting everybody. This is impacting the Ubers of the world that are sending millions and millions of messages to the person that's sending 20 messages, 5-10 messages a day even. So it's impacting everybody. It's the whole industry. So the goal of this, a lot of these changes are because text messages to be frank, they've gotten out of hand. I receive a lot of text messages, a lot of the spam messages, even political messages, or some like messages that I've never even signed up for. So, and as you guys know, there was obviously some cases but news last year when ex-President Trump was basically having a public spat with Verizon because they were blocking his messages from being sent, and supposedly they were supposed to allow political messages over, and it's a lot of like the carriers, they can at the end they can permit certain messages and exclude other messages. Now, from the user's perspective, the end user's perspective, let's say the actual subscribers of Verizon, AT&T, people don't want to be seeing a lot of messages and unwanted messages that they've never signed up for. So that's what the carriers are doing. They're trying to figure out how to prevent, and it's not just the carriers. It's things are coming from Congress and the government, where they're trying to figure out how do we protect the people, how do we protect the users. So there's us in our industry in real estate. You may not think that it's any kind of a phishing scam or anything else like that, but there are a lot of people sending out IRS scams and things like that kind of just get bundled in with all of the messages that people are receiving for buying and selling houses. And sometimes, people cannot differentiate between like, hey, this person, wants me to, update my, let's say, Facebook password, let's say, which is some kind of a phishing scam, versus, hey, I'm reaching out to buy your house. Some people cannot differentiate between those two messages, to be honest. So, me with our platform, because we send out so many hundreds and thousands of messages a day. We send out over 500,000 messages a day. I get a lot of sometimes complaints saying like, hey, like this person, can you investigate this issue? This person basically said they were basically part of a phishing scam. I look at the messages and it's a simple messages like, hey, I'm in the neighborhood, just want to see basically in some way, shape or form, it's like, hey, like, are you selling your house? But the end user perceived it as some kind of a scam or some kind of a phishing attack, and they reported to the carrier, which in turn came to me at the end of the day. So the carriers are basically trying to battle the spamming that's going on. Personally, I don't think that. I think that actually it's a good thing for our industry. I really do. I think it's not just for our industry. I think it's great for everybody that, some of the people that are really just abusing SMS as a marketing channel are going to basically, if you're abusing SMS as a marketing channel, you are going to have some repercussions basically at this point, where you're going to have to either slow down some of the messages to be more targeted to who you're sending to. And be able to obviously diversify your marketing channels. You're going to have to, you have to, I'm sure like all of your, students and everybody watching Utah, the goal for people should be, they have to run a sustainable business. It's 3 years ago, you could just, get a list, blast, 20,000 messages a day. And believe me, I've done that. And you could literally send 10, 20,000 messages per day and get away with it and get hundreds and thousands of leads a day. That was possible. The problem is that when so many people started doing it, it just kind of got out of hand. So what T-Mobile and AT&T are doing, they are saying, hey, we're going to basically, we want to have visibility into who's sending what. We want to have like transparency and be able to be accountable for everybody. Like everybody from the person that's originating it to the carriers that are sending it to the other to the end carriers like Verizon, AT&T, to Twilio, who's just an aggregate, who's just basically the middleman in this position. Everybody wants to know, like right now, is like, hey, know your customer, basically, to the point where like everybody has to have basically a stamp on like, hey, who's originating the message, where it's being sent to, so it can be tracked back to the appropriate party if in case, let's say, there's some kind of like, some kind of spamming going on. So that's what they're trying to do. The big thing that everybody's talking about is literally just called know your customer. So from every single like person in the chain, Verizon has to know their customers, Twilio has to know their customers, me as a platform, I have to know our customers, and then the customers have to be mindful of what messages they're sending. They have to be mindful of who they're sending the messages to, the content and all of these things. So they're basically wanting everybody to register and provide certain things such as your business, your use case, obviously they're going to have to go through some kind of a verification with the EIN, because at the end of the day they want just transparency. Now this is a big change in the industry. Like this is a huge change from even technological change from a lot of different there's a lot of people involved, obviously. So the current deadline is June 30th, to where they're going to start requiring certain people to register. The website is called campaignregistry.com. This is the one thing that I think people need to know is that campaignregistry.com, like technically, legally speaking, you're not required to register. Now, if you don't register, potentially in the future, you could start seeing a lot of your messages getting bounced and getting undelivered. That is something that could happen. But legally speaking, you're not required to register. Now, whether the carriers how strict they're gonna be as far as like, hey, these people that registered versus the other people that haven't registered, how are we gonna treat some of those messages? And are we going to start blocking messages that are unregistered versus the registered ones? That's still to be determined. I think it's going to depend heavily on the actual carrier implementation, which everybody's just kind of staying quiet and not disclosing a lot of information on what that's actually going to look like. How strict are they going to try to implement some of these things? My opinion, for the next, let's say 6 months, I can't speak, past 6 months from now. I don't think it's going to be a lot of potential changes, because in my opinion, I think the timeline that from June 30th is actually going to get pushed back. Again, the current timeline, if you read anything online, is June 30th. But I think there's just still so many unknowns in a lot of different places, and a lot of the carriers that I talk to, that they're like, well, we just don't know yet. We just really, that's kind of like the thing. We just don't know how it's going to be implemented. We don't know how strict they're going to be. So there's still a lot of unknowns in the industry. So at the moment, just to kind of keep it like short without going too much in detail, I think that the timeline first is going to get pushed back. I think that there's for the next several months, maybe let's say until the end of the year. And again, this is my personal opinion, and obviously not a lawyer, so I can't speak to any of those other things as far as some of the legalities. But I think it's going to get pushed back, and I don't think that people are going to see too many changes. Now, luckily, I think for a lot of your user base and a lot of the students that you teach, I personally don't think they're going to be impacted very much, at least in the short term, partly because there is what's called a low volume sender. And currently, if you read something online, it says it's 15,000 messages per month to where you don't have to register. Now, that 15,000 is subject to changing, and it could also depend on a carrier by carrier basis. So if you are a user and sending 15,000 messages or less, you, in theory, up until at least at this point, you don't have to register. Again, this might change in the future, and it could be, again, like I said, carrier by carrier dependent. I've heard anywhere from like 500 messages per day to 2,000 messages per day. If you go to a campaignregistry.com and they have some documentation, it says 15,000 messages is kind of the limit for a low volume sender. Which I think it kind of covers a lot of the people that we
Yeah, I was about to say that's man, 15,000. I know people do that volume, but because the response rate is so good with text messaging, again, I know people do more than that, but it really doesn't take that much, just from my personal experience. So, and I know you know better than me as far as the numbers and who's successful with it. I'm sure you guys talk to guys all over the country that use your services. So just following that line, what do you think as far as being under that number?
Yeah, so honestly, like our average user, and again, this is our average user, is sending out about 30. Last time I looked at it about a month and a half ago, it was about 3,400 messages on a monthly basis.
Oh yeah,
that's our average user. Now, I do have some users which I actually had to really throttle down. But 6 months ago, I had some users that were sending 60,000 messages per day. So to the point where this is what I'm talking about, that this is not a sustainable business model. I mean, you're literally just downloading the whole, getting a list of the whole country, just blasting everybody.
Yeah, just blasting everybody. Yeah.
And again, the business model is actually going to go. It's going away. There's no questions about it. Which I think is going to be very beneficial to the people that are actually running a sustainable business and are actually utilizing list stacking features and on, hey, what properties am I actually looking to target? Let's not just download the list and blast everybody. Let me think about what leads I actually want to target. Maybe I want to target properties with multiple distress points. That's kind of obviously the way we built our system initially which it comes in handy now, because you want to be able to list stack and be able to identify people with multiple distress points, and then maybe just message those people. And those people, I think, are the people that are running a sustainable business and not sending out 20,000 messages a day are actually going to, in my opinion, in the short term at least, are going to see a lot of benefit, because now the people that are sending 20, 30,000, like that person that I was mentioning, 60,000 messages per day, those users are gonna not be able to send those messages anymore.
Yeah.
To the point where if you're actually cleaning up your list and thinking through how you're actually marketing, you're going to be able to get a hold of potentially more people, because the other set of people that are guys that are just blasting away messages are not going to be able to, or they're going to be blocked. I can tell you that much.
Wow. Okay.
So I see that as a positive for our industry. Again, I know that I want to get my cell phone back. I really don't even answer to people that don't that I don't have them saved in my contact list. Messages are automatically getting even spammed. I have in my message my cell phone messages are automatically going. Even my text messages are going into a spam folder, to where I don't even have to check them. but that's what's kind of happening in the industry, and that's why people are just over abusing currently this channel as a marketing channel.
Wow. Okay.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't have anything kind of more to add besides the one thing that I'm going to say though is that which is a very important point is that T-Mobile and AT&T are on board with this 10 DOC thing. Verizon is not on board, which is going to be interesting to see how it's going to play out because Verizon implemented it. Yeah, so Verizon implemented 10 DOC actually 2 years ago, but their implementation didn't have a whole lot of consequences to the way actually messaging worked, at least for us, in our industry. They started charging more, which obviously they're making a lot more money for every single text message. There's going to be a slight bump increase in, even the messages with T-Mobile and AT&T that you're going to have to pay, which is about 1/4 cent more per message. That's impacting everybody. But Verizon is not on board with their campaignregistry.com, which again, the people that I've talked to, so I have some consultants in the telecommunications industry, they're as well saying like, we really don't know how this is going to play out and if Verizon is going to be forced in the future to implement this campaign registry, the registration process. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's interesting to see that Twilio is actually, because they're the biggest in the industry as far as being able to Twilio utilize. It's basically a platform that people utilize. Uber uses Twilio. We're a user of Twilio. It's going to be so Twilio. It's going to be interesting if they require people to register. But again, like if you're going to get blocked if you don't register versus you register, that's still to be determined. To be honest. But again, like I said, I think the good thing is that a lot of the users that are sending less than 15,000 messages per month should be okay.
Okay. Well, okay. Just to flip it over, related but not related, I guess. Cold calling. How does this reflect on cold calling, if any?
Honestly, I can keep it really short, but there's not going to be changes in the cold calling. The Trace Act, what just so I can kind of summarize it, the Trace Act and what they're trying to battle is that people they're trying to basically battle kind of spoofing. So basically, spoofing is like, hey, I'm calling you, but I'm not calling you from my cell phone. I'm literally calling you from a bogus phone number. That's what's displaying on your caller ID. Just to give you an example, literally, my mom like a few weeks ago, she's like, hey, APS called me, and APS is the electrical power company here. Mm-hmm. And I can say somebody basically answers, say, hey, your power is going to be shut off tomorrow if you don't actually make a payment today. And so she hung up, called the number back. The number was disconnected, but it showed up on her caller ID as an APS number.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So this is a phishing scam. There's obviously IRS scams. There's Social Security kind of scams. So that's what they're trying to battle. I don't foresee anybody in the industry honestly getting impacted because again, like people are just not utilizing spoofing technologies and auto dialers and things like that really the Trace Act is supposed to prevent.
One question I asked Jesse, I think he said no, but just to verify, currently through the batch platforms or services, you don't do y'all have or don't have a current method of scrubbing for the DNC list, do not call list?
So our dialer automatically scrubs DNC. There's a button you can check.
Okay.
Scrub or not scrub, that's an option. I'm not going to comment on the legalities of all of these things, but it is an option you can scrub against it. On batch leads, for as far as the texting, it's going to actually be released within a week or 10 days, where you can manually, if you wanted to, scrub out. Just to give you a perspective, there's about 240 million phone numbers on the national do not call list. That it represents about 70% of the whole country's database. So it's a lot of phone numbers. That are on the national DNC list. So we do have that option. We scrub against litigators by default. Obviously, there's about 1.8 million phone numbers on the litigator list. And that's basically people that are that have had litigations, that have had official written complaints in courts against telemarketers, relatives, and then lawyers of litigators.
Okay.
So, that's even on our dialer, we don't even allow you to import. We literally just block it without asking you. to be honest, just because we want everybody to be protected, even us. I mean, we just don't want to expose our platform to just litigations at the end of the day.
How does that work in relation to ringless voicemail? I don't think you all have that feature yet, or do you?
No, there's a lot of legalities around ringless voicemail, and a lot of states have actually ruled against it, meaning that they've really made it illegal. I mean, it's a lot of states now.
Okay.
So again, I'm not a lawyer, so I really can't. Just different states have different laws about the ringless voicemails. But honestly, that's part of one of the reasons why we just don't believe in it as a long-term strategy. It's one of those things that ringless voicemail will allow you to basically spoof calls, spoof phone numbers, which in turn kind of goes against even the trace tax that's getting implemented very soon.
Okay, and the robocalls or the voice broadcast, that goes in line with cold calling more so, right?
Yeah, the robocalls is basically kind of like the same like ringless voicemails. It's very, a lot of states honestly prohibited currently. People are going to use it if they want to use it. It's just they take it, they take the risks upon themselves.
I got you. Okay, all right. Well, hey, man, I think you really covered it all. People have questions in the comments of this video when it's posted, but for the most part, from what I've gathered, if you're under 15,000 per month, you're probably going to be good to go. Text messages is what I'm referring to. You're probably going to be good to go.
Yeah, and let me give you a couple of things that I think some of your listeners might actually find helpful. Just some tips and tricks. Really, what's really working is you have to be able to messages are going to get blocked. Now, whether you get blocked 10% of your messages or 80% of your messages, it's really going to depend on kind of your strategies and a lot of the message content you're sending. We don't actually control as a platform. We actually don't control we don't actually have a lot of control over the messages you're sending or your throughput as well. But we do limit you how much messages you can send on a per minute or per second basis. But besides that, we see some users that are getting 95% deliverability and some users that are getting literally 10% deliverability. And so I've seen some actual campaigns that have 100% blockage rate. And that happens because of several things. Phone numbers get spammed. So phone numbers get spammed very easily. There's 3 actually companies that they're analytics companies that basically they're privately owned companies, so they're not anything government backed. But everybody from Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, they use those companies for validating if phone numbers are being spammed, if they're being abused. FirstOrion.com is used by T-Mobile. There's a couple of more that I can share with you if you wanted to, that the Verizon uses, and then AT&T uses another one. But basically, these companies are basically designed to ingest a lot of the data on a national level and be able to identify phone numbers for spam reasons. Now, if let's say you send a message and 20 people say, "Hey, this is a spam," that company is going to pick it up as spam. It's going to report it to, let's say, the carriers, and the phone number gets automatically marked as spam. And the carriers can actually block these numbers. And at that point, your messages are going to stop getting delivered. Now, I've seen because we get obviously a lot of internal reports and a lot of the message content. There's a lot of basically the message we get is just carrier filtering. Carrier is just filtering those messages. We don't have any control over what messages get delivered or don't get delivered. All we do is hey, we take your message that you wanted to send, we send it out, and then whatever comes back, hey, was that message delivered? Sometimes there's an unknown status because the carrier never reported actually what happened to that message. Sometimes it says, hey, the carrier is blocked due to spam or carrier violations. So people really just need to pay attention to their numbers are being spammed or not. We in our systems run a spam check through actually 2 different companies now on a daily basis. So if numbers get spammed, you're going to see that numbers have been spammed. And you can either pause that number or release it. If you let some time go by, that number should go back. In theory, it should go back to normal status because it kind of goes through this cooling off period. And it's gonna, later on, you can start sending messages again. But it really depends how much you're abusing a phone number. On the dialer side, something that I actually learned actually last week is, so I'm again, I have some consultants that I speak on a regular basis. They said, hey, this number has been kind of changing, over the past couple of years, but at the moment, carriers are basically will very, very quickly identify a number as spam if that phone number is dialing more than 140 phone numbers per day. So that's kind of the threshold, 140 dials per day. Like you shouldn't actually exceed that number, because that after you exceed it, it's really just goes into like it very quickly can go into like a sandbox, and then it'll just get spam, like completely blocked out. So on our dialer side, what we see is like some users that are maybe having, like let's say 2, 3, 5 agents dialing from maybe 2, 3 different like phone numbers only. They're dialing, they're having all of these connect rates, and all of a sudden it just plummets. So when it plummets, we know, hey, like your numbers got spammed. Like that's pretty much what happens.
Yeah.
So now we started recommending, hey, if a typical agent is dialing on 8 hours a day, let's say full time, per agent you need 10 different DIDs, meaning phone numbers to dial from. Because in theory, that agent can dial, let's say, 100, let's say 1,000 calls, which is less basically than the 140 calls per day per phone number. Now, like the way the carriers are treating it is like, hey, 140 calls a day. Like if I was actually to pick up my cell phone and start dialing manually, how many phone numbers can I actually reach in a day? And that 140 is right about the number that of people that actually probably call in a day. So that's how they're basing it off of. Anything above 140 is like, hey, this is probably an automated system, and we're going to take a look at it deeper.
Okay, boom. And I've noticed when I'm getting calls from, well, we'll just say cash buyers, a lot, and I don't know how I figured it out. A lot of time, I know these people are not calling a lot of people, and they come up on my phone as spam, but they're actually calling about business or whatever. So it's like you just don't even know at this point what's an actual legitimate call and what may not be one or whatever. So it's very interesting. I guess once the marketers get a hold of something, we're just going to abuse it. Well, which I don't think we are, but those heavy hitter marketers, they just going to just go crazy with it or whatever and just make it hard on everybody because they're going to max it out. So, yeah, man, that's a lot of information, man. I think that clears up a lot of things. Obviously, we still are in limbo on a couple of the things, or we just have to see what happens over the next couple of months. But I think most people that use the text messaging, especially, are as you say, your numbers show that the average person only doing about 3,400 a month or whatever. So, well within the guidelines of that. So, I know that one of the bigger things is that opening message to a person. And you have the negative words that you can and can't sing, but within the batch lead system, you all do a good job of just automatically identifying those. And I know that'll probably continue to change or whatever. And what I tell people, I get the question all the time: what I need a text messaging script. I say I really can't provide one because then everybody's going to send the same thing. It'll just automatically become spam. I just tell you need to be creative. That first message is what's being blocked. So you got to get creative just to get them to respond. It doesn't even have to be related to real estate or whatever. You just got to get them to respond, and then you can go into what you're actually reaching out to them for. Am I thinking in the right terms there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some cases where secondary messages might get blocked as well, but it's a lot rare for sure. But yeah, people just need to be creative, and we in the very, very beginning, we had these we were like, hey, what messages? He said, well, here's a bunch of templates that you can use. All of a sudden, boom, all of these messages get spammed all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So because people started just using it, and it's like one of these things. Well, what's the magic message? So maybe Ty, you have the answer to the magic message, but.
No, I'm not gonna put it out there. I got something we've been having to work for a while now. We hadn't had to change it, whatever, but yeah, man, Ivo, I really appreciate, man. I know you're a busy guy. You spent your time with us, so maybe we'll revisit this in a couple of months if things change or whatever. And again, guys, if you got any questions, just post them in the comments section. If I don't know the answer, I'll shoot an email over to him, and I'm sure he'll get the answer for me, and we'll go from there. Yeah. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, I'm good.
All right, man. All right, guys, as I always say, we'll see you on the flip side.
Thanks.
Flip man, it's the flip man. You want some money in your hand? Flipping houses without credit or your cash. Get that bag.